Good evening. This side, Rahul Magan here. Every country of the globe holds multiple laws. Example, bankruptcy laws, company law, accounting law, financial laws, security laws, and multiple. Singapore also holding lot of laws. And ladies and gentlemen, in our series, which we titled as a Securities Law, today we are covering one of the finest laws made by Singapore, which is Securities and Future Act 2001. Ladies and gentlemen, I must admit and agree that the law formation of the Singapore is plenty good because they cover even the minutest point in the law. And I think this is one of the predominant reasons why Singapore is acting as a global financial center. According to public information, hundreds of international banks hold offices in Singapore. There is hardly any financial product which is not traded in Singapore. More importantly, when it comes to even exotic derivatives and derivatives whose valuation is tough, even they are a part of Singapore financial market. The kind of liquidity Singapore financial market provide, I doubt we should not discuss this beyond imagination. Singapore is a truly global financial center from all perspectives. And very important thing about Singapore is that Singapore is continuously evolving. So there is one thing that you did your job and then you are living on your legacy, but Singapore is different. Singapore created the legacy and continuously evolving on the legacy, continuous improvement, continuous improvement. And this is the reason why Singapore is on a year-to-year basis is titled amongst top competitive economies of the globe. That sheer hard work of the Singapore comes on paper. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, we need to understand that in law perspective, in law, there are two things. Number one is the act and number two is the regulation. Generally, the central banks and the legal authorities make regulations and sometimes they make act also. Sometimes we call code also. Now, code means that code is a summation of multiple acts and regulation. So we can have 15 regulations, but it is cumbersome for any central bank, financial institution, or any regulatory body to manage all these regulations. So what they do, they accumulate all these regulations and create what is called code, which means it is sum of all regulations and acts which think and act in a similar manner, or basically the acts or the regulations who are dealing in a specific issue, about a specific issue. I downloaded a page which is on the website of the Monetary Authority of the Singapore, and it speaks like that. Securities and Future Act, in Singapore parlance, we title this as SFA, Securities and Future Act, SFA. SFA 2001 governs the regulation of activities and institutions in securities and derivative industry, including leveraged foreign exchange trading of financial benchmarks and clearing facilities. Now, we all know that the world is having hundreds and hundreds of financial benchmarks like LIBOR, but now LIBOR is phased out. We are having RFRs, risk-free reference rate, TONA, ESTR, SONIA, ONIA, more than 13, in mortgages market. They have huge financial benchmarks. Some are dominated by Asia, some are dominated by Europe and different countries. Similarly, in the foreign exchange, we have numerous benchmarks, overnight index swap curve, benchmark curves, or I would say the swap curves and so on and so forth. So everywhere we are having benchmarks. Now, the very important thing is that I strongly feel that benchmark is of three types. Number one is a financial benchmark. A financial benchmark is a benchmark which governs the relevant financial industry. Example, for a minute, let's assume that LIBOR is not phased out, though it is incorrect, it is phased out. Then LIBOR governs the interest rate structure. LIBOR has nothing to do with the pricing of the forward contract. For a minute, LIBOR has nothing to do with anything, but the scope and size of the LIBOR was so big that trillions and trillions worth of derivative market is priced on LIBOR. So take a note that. Second, in my respectful submission, is a synthetic benchmark. And the credit derivative market in a world is running on synthetic benchmarks, but ladies and gentlemen, synthetic benchmarks are hard to price assets. Technically speaking, assets are priced in three ways: L1, L2, and L3. Honestly speaking, L3 is titled as hard to value asset, which means that these are the assets which are hard to value. I title them as synthetic benchmarks, and ladies and gentlemen, in a mortgage industry, there are ample of synthetic benchmarks we are having. So, this Securities and Future Act, shortly known as SFA, applies to dealing in capital market products, product financing, licensed fund management company, corporate finance advisory, REIT management. REIT means real estate investment trust, credit rating agency, securities crowdfunding, venture capital fund management company, which is in itself is a very interesting concept, exempt capital market service entity, exempt future broker, exempt OTC derivative broker, providing custodial services. Custody in itself is a topic to study in itself. And I'm telling you that there must be a topic about how the custodians behave when we speak about MBA and all these courses, because this topic, the custody, which I'm referring to, is such a big topic, and especially with the advent of new technology, new derivative instrument, now the settlement cycle slowly and steadily moving to T+1, and so on and so forth. Custody is a very important topic. Exempt corporate finance advisor service accredited investor. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, when the time would come, we'll discuss about that. But let me tell you that accredited investor is a specialized category of investors. Almost all financial institutions in the world, they define accredited investors in their own way. And I completely regard that, because everyone holds his own definition. They see how deep is the financial market of their country, so on and so forth. But let me tell you, there is another investor which is called nominee investor, and which is another called large fund value investor. In my respectful submission, that accredited investor is, once we listen about accredited investor, then we should be technically see whether he's a large fund accredited investor or he is a non-large fund accredited investor. Because in my respectful submission, both are different. And like I said, that different countries of the globe have their different regulations. So it is, extremely hard to comment who is right, who is not right. But ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important thing. Markets and exchanges, clearing houses, trade repositories, benchmark administrator. Now, benchmark administrator in itself is a topic to study. Like I said, in my respectful submission, benchmark is of two types. Number one is a financial benchmark. Number two is a synthetic benchmark. And I completely regard that some people have another definition called designated benchmark. but I don't know whether I'm in agreement of that or not. But designated benchmark is something which requires a very healthy and prosperous debate, honestly speaking. Registered business trust, registered insurance broker, holding company of exchange and clearing house. Holdco. Holdco is actually a term of the Companies Act. So generally, it is used for people don't remember holding, don't speak holding company in a big way. They simply speak Holdco. I would say Holdco is a very important term. How the holding company works, what are the legal obligations on the holding company, and this legal, when I'm using the word legal obligations, then the legal obligations varies from country to country. Henceforth, Holdco looks like a pretty simple concept, but actually it is not as simple as you are thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward, we'll have ample of videos about Securities and Future Act. And I once again thank you that this is really a great act, but at few places, I would like to have my respectful submission before Monetary Authority of Singapore and the other bodies to kindly include that. That's my respectful submission. Today, I would be covering a definition which is called designated benchmark. So basically, we all know that that every act of the globe is having a section called interpretation section. Now, interpretation section is called how do you interpret the terms of that act. But sometimes what happen, the relevant country having an act called General Clauses Act. General Clauses Act means if anything creating an ambiguity or XYZ, then you refer to the General Clauses Act of that country. General Clauses Act will tell you that what exactly is the definition of that country. But anyways, we are not here discussing about the General Clauses Act. So section 2, which is an interpretation section, section 2, subsection 1, say in this act, unless the context otherwise requires, administering a designated benchmark. Now, please note about administering. The designated benchmark means part A, controlling the development of the definition of the designated benchmark for the purpose of determining a designated benchmark. B, controlling the development of the methodology of determining a designated benchmark. Methodology. Controlling the review of the definition of the designated benchmark for the purpose of determining a designated benchmark. Now, please note that in the part A, the act is saying controlling the development of the definition. Development of the definition. Please look at the words. On the contrary, part C is saying controlling the review of the definition. So part 1 is development of the definition, and while part C is the review of the definition. Part 2 talks about part D, controlling the review of methodology. So it is in consonance with the part B, which is talking about development of the methodology. And here is talking about review of the methodology. Managing any arrangements, processes, or mechanism for the purpose of determining a designated benchmark. This is part E. Part F is collecting, analyzing, or processing any information or expression of opinion for the purpose of determining the designated benchmark. Now, my respectful submission to Monetary Authority of Singapore and other bodies is that when we are using a word collecting, analyzing, or processing, then my respectful submission is that we are covering the whole gamut of the financial market. Because let's speak about a research firm. What a research firm do, a global big research firm do. They first collect the information. This covers the information of the company. And then they analyze that information. And once they analyze that information, then they process that information filtered that information the way they wish to present. And then they made it public or private. It's completely the call of XYZ agency. Here, the word used is collecting, analyzing, or processing. Applying a formula or other methods of calculation to information or expression of opinion in order to determine a designated benchmark, which means that when you are determining a benchmark, that this benchmark is so and so, covering so and so financial instrument, then to create this so and so benchmark, you need to have a formula in this. It looks very easy, but that's the real job is not very easy. And last, ladies and gentlemen, part H, monitoring and conducting surveillance of any information or expression of opinion provided for the purpose of determining a designated benchmark. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is called the designing of the law. This is called how you can reach till the minutest part of the law, which means in part A, you are talking about controlling and development of definition. On the contrary, in the part B, you are talking about controlling and development of methodology, which means what is methodology in a very plain English, very plain English. Methodology means a sequence, how you're going to running the show in a very plain parlance. But when we speak about financial markets, then the definition of methodology is not plain vanilla. It varies from instrument to instrument, derivative to derivative, index to index, and sometimes big indexes to big indexes. Then the Act talks about controlling the review of definition. So first you develop the definition, then you review the definition. And part D, review of the methodology. First you develop the methodology and then you review the methodology. And then part number E talks about managing any arrangements, processes, or mechanism for the purpose of determining a designated benchmark. And F part, my favorite, collecting, analyzing, or processing any information or expression of opinion. And the last is that but does not include providing information in relation to a designated benchmark or any act that is necessary or incidental to providing such information. It's a kind of proviso which they added, they are added. So this is for today. But my respectful submission to Monetary Authority of Singapore, if possible, then sir, please have a detailed definition as well as the understanding about synthetic benchmarks. Because even in the foreign exchange market, where we are not short of benchmarks, to be honest, many a times when we use synthetic benchmarks, synthetic structures, and especially in options, you see that. You talk about any currency, whether you talk about when you talk about the direct pairs, you talk about indirect pairs, option structures is very prevalent, very prevalent. You talk about Asian card, Japanese card, Luxembourg card, Frankfurt card, New York card. The option structures are very, very prevalent. Even in options, we have exchange traded contracts, we have over-the-counter contracts, we have clientele contracts. So it's a very deep market, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen. Henceforth, synthetic structures in options play a very significant role. Very significant role. And it's an art. It's an art, not a science, because when we create a synthetic structure, then the development is completely dependent on the attitude and the knowledge. That's very important. Henceforth, my respectful submission is to have the synthetic structure, please. Ladies and gentlemen, more on the cards. Thank you very much. This is Rahul Magan. You have my number 9899242978. 9899242978. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.